So this is a mimer from Yudal Kyslev, Tafshin Memches Shnas Tismach. The Rebbe's year that he proclaimed as the year of joy, and this was actually the Shabbos came out on the Rebbe's 59th anniversary, as he's about to say, and he's going to explain a mimer that the Friedrich Rebbe said on that very day of the Chasunah, throughout at the Chasunah, later on the Chasunah, during the Shabbat brachas, the Friedrich Rebbe said different Amorim, and here the Rebbe is going to bring in the mimer that the Rebbe, one of the Amorim that the Friedrich Rebbe said, by the way. One who created, I will look at a translation that I got for all these different words, joy and happiness. Chasun v'kala, groom and bride. Gila rina, gladness and song. Ditza v'chedva, fear and delight. Ava v'achva, love and harmony. And shalom v'reus, peace and friendship. And maybe the translations are not exact. I took this out of a translation of a Rambam. It says Medayik, which is more by Maimer Yudal Kyslev. Should never be Yudal Kyslev. And my father-in-law, Friedrich Rebbe, is asked about this. In a Maimer of the 14th of Kislev, that was said on the 14th of Kislev, Kosov, but he says a Maimer, like it said on the title of the Maimer, that was Lefnei Nuntet Shana, that was a Maimer from 59 years prior. In other words, the year was 1928, Tafresh Beites. Tzarech l'ham, when you understand, Lama Magdim Sasun v'Simcha l'Chasun v'Kal. Why does he say first Sasun and Simcha, a joy and happiness, and then he says Chasun v'Kal? Why is there joy and happiness over here? Isn't it the Chasun and Kala the cause of the joy and the happiness? The entire reason why the joy and gladness is coming about are because of the Chasunah and the Kala. Like it says at the conclusion of the bracha, the one who makes rejoice the Chasun with the Kala. So in other words, it's all about the Chasun and the Kala. In one of the other of the 7 brachas we make at the Sheva brachas, we say Mesameach Chasun v'Kala, the one who makes the Chasun and Kala rejoice. So therefore, since the whole joy is a result of the Chasun and Kala, so when he enumerates, he says the one who created Sasun v'Simcha Chasun v'Kala and so on, he should first say Asher bara Chasun v'Kala, and as a result of that, there's Sasun, there's Simcha, there's Gila, Rina, Ditza v'Chedva, and so on. And the Friedrich Rebbe explains in the Maimer, the reason why he prefaces Sasun and Simcha to the Chasun and Kala, Mishum Sasun v'Simcha u'machmas etzem zeh shemiskabtzim harbe anoshim Yisrael biyachad. The very Simcha itself is from the fact that many Yidden get together. That is already a cause of Simcha. In other words, we don't have to have the Chasun and Kala yet over here. The Chasun and Kala aren't here yet, and still we have reason to be besimcha. Why? The very fact that Eden get together, that's a cause for Simcha. And we add even more so, a more of a cause for Simcha. Especially when we gather together to be involved in matters of Torah and matters of fulfilling mitzvahs. Or to make good resolutions to strengthen ourselves in the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. Like this mimer was said by Fabrengen of the Rebbe. The Fabrengen is a vehicle to make resolutions and to strengthen oneself in fulfilling Torah mitzvahs. And in such a manner, how do they strengthen each other? Like it says, like a man will tell his fellow, will assist his fellow, and to his brother he will say, be strong. In other words, that the fact that the Yidden get together, so each one encourages and helps the other person in their Torah mitzvahs. In such a way, how do they strengthen each other in Torah mitzvahs. They do so. There are different ways how people can try to strengthen other people in Torah mitzvahs. There's the ways that was very prevalent before the Baal Shem Tov came along, which was through rebuke and reproach and through all types of things that a person was told about terrible things that could occur, etc. But rather, the Rebbe says that the way how a person needs to strengthen another in Torah mitzvah should be in a way of love, brotherhood, and peace and friendship. Even the Achdas Yisrael in such a way of Yidden being joined and united. So then, when a person is in such a way that they're gathering together to be involved in Torah mitzvahs in a way that they strengthen each other, in a way that's out of love and peace, that itself causes the most highest level of joy and happiness, even if we wouldn't have the Chasunah and Kal. By the way, it's a custom among Chassidim that always a wedding venue was used as an opportunity to Fabring. I remember even as growing up as a child in Crown Heights, at the end of the wedding, Chassidim would sit around the table and Fabring and so on. Yes, we could add to this. This is the main thing what the Friedrich Rebbe says in his mind. Rebbe is going to add to this, Tafshin Memches, as well as the year that we're in now, in Tafshin Pei Gimel, is a year of Hakel. But even the Hakel Aslam in a way that you shall gather the nation. By day, mile in the floor, Yisrael, through this powerful and wondrous advantage of the union amongst Yidden. So then this unity amongst Yidden brings about joy and happiness in the Chasunah and Kal. Not only does it bring joy and happiness in the Chasunah and Kal, physically in a physical Chasunah and Kal down here, until they affect a joy and a happiness in the supernal level of groom and bride. Who are the supernal levels of groom and bride? Hashem and the Yidden are considered Chasunah and Kal. So this makes, through the level of Hakil, through the idea of Yidden getting together down here and being in a state of joy, this adds Simcha also in Hashem and the Yidden. Shleimar, we could say, this is also the reason for the custom amongst Yidden. The Chasunah and Kal increase in words of Torah and in stock in the day of Chuppah. That's why the Chasun chazers a maimer. In other communities, they chazer some other Dvar Torah. And the Rebbe always encouraged that the Chasun and the Kala and the families of the Chasun and Kala and even the friends, the relatives and so on that care for the Chasun and Kala should increase in giving tzedakah on the day of the wedding. And also they increase in matters of davening. First of all, the actual Sheva Brachas is more than the usual davening that we do on an ordinary day. And the Chasun Kala say Tillim all day, and the Chasun adds the Alchet to the Shemoneh Esrei by Mincha, etc. Maybe the Kala also. I've never been a Kala, I don't know. So Koilol had tefillah achi ikrish brachazu, including the most core tefillah that's in this brachazu, this bracha that we just now said of Asher Bara Sas V'Simcha. What's the main part that's in that bracha? It says Meheir Hashem Elokeinu Yishama Bar Yehuda B'chutz Yerushalayim Kol Sasam V'Kol Simcha Kol Chasam V'Kol Kala. Speedily Hashem should make it be heard in the cities of Yehuda and the outskirts of Yerushalayim, all these sounds of Sasan and Simcha and Chasunah and Kal and so on. What does that mean? So why do we have the day of the Chuppah is a time of Torah and Tzedakah and davening? That is the content of the advantage of getting together by the joy and the rejoicing of Chasunah and Kal, Then we gather together for the sake of Torah and its mitzvahs, and specifically in the three pillars upon which the world stands: adding in Torah, adding in davening, avodah, and the idea of adding its tzedakah. So, like we spoke about earlier, that these are things when Yidden get together to do, this adds and this increases the simcha. So, therefore, that's why on the day of a Chasunah, it's an auspicious time to add in all of these three things. Especially when the coming together of these Yidden is in the joy and the rejoicing of Chasunah and Kal. Yet from that it has a unique advantage. Like it's explained in another mimer said in the very day of the Chasunah, in Yudal Keslev, Tafresh Peitas by the Rebbe's Chasunah, few hours after the Frierdiker Rebbe said the mimer titled he said a different mimer. He said a mimer on the mimer Chazal, Shekol Hanen Mesudas Chasunah. Whoever derives pleasure and benefit. In other words, they partake in the meal of a chasun and they make him happy. They merit the Torah that was given with 5 sounds. It speaks about the sounds of the thunder and the lightning and the fire, etc. So there's 5 different types of descriptions over there of sounds that took place for Matan Torah. In a similar vein, the Chasun also has 5 sounds. Also concerning Chasun, it says in this pasuk 5 sounds. Etc. So we see 5 times sound. So we see how powerful it is, the connection between Torah and Matan Torah and the Chasun. For this understood, that this gathering has a specific and special advantage. Because it has such a great quality and such a great advantage, it has the capability to affect the Chasun and Kal above. Hashem and the Yidden, that they should have an increase in joy, because otherwise we could ask, how is it possible that us down here, by what we do, should cause an increase in joy in the Chasunah and Kal above? The reason why we're able to do so is because we have this amazing power of Matan Torah that's associated with the 5 sounds, with the 5 koilos of rejoicing and making the Chasun rejoice. And especially we have the power of the collection of Klal Yisrael and the power of doing the mitzvahs and achlatas tovos and so on. Next page in the Bible. Yet we still need to understand, just like the mimer that we originally started with asks, the Ikar B'Sudas Mitzvah, what's the main thing of this Sudas Mitzvah? Is not true. He said that there's all these reasons to be happy. Because when you can get together, we're happy, and because they're getting together for the sake of Torah mitzvahs and to make good resolutions, etc., etc., etc. So we have all these wonderful reasons to be happy. But what is the main reason for the happiness over here? The main reason is l'sameach as a Chasunah Kal. The main thing is to make the Chasunah and Kal happy. And that is the main joy. So first of all, the main purpose of the Sudas Mitzvah is to make the Chasunah and Kal rejoice. And the main happiness over here, even though we spoke about all different types of reasons to be happy, but what's the main happiness? What's the main reason we're happy? To make the Chasunah and Kal rejoice. So therefore, still the question remains about the order in the bracha. Should have said instead, Asher Baruch Chasunah and Kal, they created the Chasunah and Kal. And only afterwards he should have mentioned all the other 10 things of joy, Sasun, V'Simcha, Gila, Rina, Ditza, V'Chedva, etc., etc. Because they're the main focus over here. They're the whole reason why this is all taking place. The Frierdiker Rebbe explains in his Maimer The Chain Hoya Seder Brios. This was the order of the creation. Remember that the bracha says, Asher bara sasim v'simcha chasim v'kal. The one who created joy and happiness and chasim and kal. So what the Friedrich Rebbe is saying over here is that the Seder Isavas on the Vroim, in the order of how the created beings came into being, who was first? First, Barak Halish Baruch Hu Sasim v'simcha tchil. Initially created joy and happiness. And only afterwards he created Chasunah and Kal. That is why it says it over here first, because he's talking about Asher Bara, he's talking about the creation. That itself but needs to be understood. Why does he need to create Chasunah and Simcha before the Chasunah and Kal? The reason for the matter. Why did he create first the joy and happiness, and only afterwards he created Chasunah and Kal? The Friedrich Rebbe explains, so the Chasunah and Kal should be residing and situated in a state of joy and happiness. The simple meaning of this is, I'm going to go into deeper ideas in a moment, but the simple meaning behind this is that normally, for example, by the creation of the world, it says that first everything, the entire world was created, and at the end of creation, the last day of creation, on Friday, Adam and Chava were created, which is the primordial, the original, the ultimate Chasunah and Kal. And we talk about that he placed them in Gan Eden, that's part of the brachas under the chuppah and so on. Why did the Chazal say that the Eibishter do all of that? Isn't Adam and Chava the pinnacle of creation? Why were they created last? But he understands the reason why they were created last is because everything was created for them to be ready. And the example that the Chazal give is from literally preparing a wedding feast. That all you do is first you have to prepare the food and bring in the guests and the tables and the chairs and the whole everything. Then what's the last thing that's brought in? The last thing that's brought in is the Chasunah and Kal, because all of those things are made in their honor. That's why all the cooking took place and the whole and et cetera, et cetera. So whatever is the purpose, whatever is the goal, that is what's brought out finally. So the same thing the Eibishter created, the way the Friedrich Rebbe explains it. First, the Eibishter created Sos and V'simcha, so that when the Chasunah and Kal arrive on the scene, there already be over there for them Sos and V'simcha. So now the Rebbe is going to go in a deeper explanation of why Sos and V'simcha must be created before the Chasunah and Kal. The Rebbe says, we can say the explanation of this is the Indian Chasunah and Kal, the idea of the Chasunah and Kal, it's the idea of the union between the giver and the receiver. The Chasun, the husband, and the wife is a mashpia mekabel, respectively, the giver and the receiver. But giver and receiver are very disparate beings. How does one join mashpia mekabel? They are seemingly opposites. They are completely polar opposites, one from another. Why they have simcha? Simcha allows for and causes that two opposites can get together. Like we know the famous rule, the simcha pairs together, simcha breaks through and bursts through barriers. That's why Hashem first created Sas and Simcha that breaks through barriers. Only afterwards, mashpia mekabel, because now that we have already the tools for the Chasunah and Kal to be joined, so now we can join the Chasunah and Kal together. We could add to this the inyan on Nisuim The idea of marriage is the revelation of the power of the Ein Sof down here below, like it's explained in many places, because the idea of marriage is for the sake of having children. The having children is a power of the infinite, like we speak about in the Mamorim of Basi Lagani, because it has in it the potential for reproducing forever. My children will have further children, and their children will have more children, etc., etc. So that's the whole idea of marriage is something that encapsulates and expresses the Ein Sof down here below. That's why he speaks about in Basilagani, you need to have a very high level come down, etc. So how do we draw that down? Therefore, for the sake of marriage, the idea of marriage is the revelation of the power of the Ein Sof of the infinite. We need to first create Chasunah v'Simcha that breaks through all barriers. So in other words, if the infinite cannot come down normally down here, it's down here, it's too limiting, it's too constricting. But if we break through all the barriers, if we break through all the limitations, so then we could have that even down here, the Ein Sof can come down. That's why, since Chasunah and Kala is about bringing down the power of the Ein Sof, so we need to have prepared for them the tools to be able to bring down the Ein Sof, which in Chasunah and Simcha, which breaks through all the barriers. And essentially, the Rebbe said over here 2 points and 2 reasons why Chasunah and Simcha have to precede the Chasunah and Kala. One reason is because you need to join 2 opposites, and to be able to join 2 opposites, they can't be boxed into their own limitations. If the Chasunah is limited to being a mashpia state, the Kala is limited to being a makabel state, they cannot really join together. So they need to get out of themselves. How does one get out of themselves? How do they break through their boundaries? They get out of themselves through Simcha, which is, by the way, Siddur gives the example that, for example, you could have a person that by nature is very reticent and very introverted, and they don't usually express themselves, and you barely hear them speaking more than 2 syllables at a time. All of a sudden, by the wedding of their only child, they're like you all of a sudden hear them speaking and talking and dancing, and they're hugging everybody, and they're jumping all over the place. You never even knew that this person knew more than 3 words, because the simcha that the person feels on the marriage of their child is something that breaks through those barriers, that box that they were limited in. The same thing, the simcha of that's there, prepared for the Chasunah and Kala, helps the Chasunah and Kala break through their barriers to be able to create a union and to create a new home. And the same thing, it breaks through the barriers for the Ein Sof to be able to come down here as well. So now the Rebbe explains in a similar vein, we have this in general about Mashpia Makabel throughout the whole Seder Ishtalshus, which is in our Avodas Hashem. The Bible is about Avodah to explain this idea that there is the Avodah and the union of Mashpia Makabel, and this needs to be predicated on the idea of Simcha. So we have this Yishlach we can preface what we spoke earlier, the Ramaskal Yofas Chos in the Shabbos Parshas Chayesor, that we learned in the Maimer titled, it is more beautiful, the talk of the servants of the forefathers than the actions of the children, or the Torah of the children. It is more precious the talk of the servants of the Avos, like in the case of Eliezer and Avram, that the Torah repeats the story twice about him going to the well and making a sign, and the girl who will tell me that she's also going to give my camels to drink, etc., etc. So it tells the whole story first as it occurred in real time, and then it tells over how Eliezer told the story. It doesn't say that Eliezer just told him what happened. It actually goes through the whole story again. When it comes to the Torah, to the halachas of Torah, many things are just a little hint, an extra pasuk, an extra word, an extra this. The Torah is very karg with the verter when it comes to learning and teaching us halachas. Very cheap with words, but when it comes to Eliezer, it speaks like so much, over more than even necessary. So the Chazal say, because it's more special by Hashem, the talk of the servants of the Abbas of the Torah and the halachas of the children. We explained in that previous Maimer, I believe we learned this Maimer this year also. What is the advantage of the speech and the talking of Eliezer? What was his talk concerning? It was concerning the shidduch of Yitzchak and Rivka, which is Yichud Chasunah Kala, the joining of a Chasunah and a Kala. The Roim is all close, that the idea of the union of Chasunah and Kala hints on the general service of a person, like was explained over there in that Maimer, that the Rebbe spoke about on Shabbos Parshas Chayisara of that year, Tavshin Memches, that in every action of a mitzvah, there's a union of the mashpia and the makabel. If you remember, we learned about it, that there's the kavon of the mitzvah, and there's the action of the mitzvah, there's the command of the mitzvah, and there's the doing of the mitzvah, and many different aspects that Rebbe spoke about in that Maimer, where there's a union of a mashpia and a makabel in every mitzvah. And why is that so? Because in the person there is always this union of mashpia and makabel in the performance of mitzvahs. Every aspect in the service of Hashem arrives and it comes about through the nefesh halakis, affecting the animal soul or affecting the body, that they should fulfill the mitzvahs. That's another aspect and component of a joining of Chasunah and Kala. Nefesh halakis and nefesh habamis are likened to Chasunah and Kala, mashpia and makabel. The nefesh halakis in this regard is the giver, the influencer, and the nefesh habamis is the receiver. And the neshama v'aguf, for the soul and the body, is the Chasunah and Kala. And even more in general, where we find mashpia and makabel in Torah mitzvahs, not in the macro, in the person himself, but in the broad sense. The general avoid of a person is to be involved in matters of the world, and to transform the world and the matters of the world and to make it into a home for Hashem. When you're transforming the world and you're making it into a home for Hashem, so then you also have the two aspects and components, mashpia and makabel. The person that is doing and affecting the world to make it a home for the Eibishter, he is called a mashpia. He is a chas. And the world in which one makes the home, the world is considered the receiver and the kala. So therefore, we have throughout the person's avoid in this world, we have this idea of a marriage. We have the union of Chasunah and Kala, and that's why it's so important that the Torah gives so much space talking about Eliezer's speaking about the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka, because it's not just about the marriage of Yitzchak and Rivka. It's about our entire avodah of making the union of Hashem with this world. Yes, we could add to this, concerning marriage, it says, and it says that the husband will cleave to his wife, and they will be as one flesh. How are they one flesh? Well, we have this. The Rashi brings us down right away. Through the union of the Chasunah and Kala, the child is formed, and Bisham Nasa B'Sadam Echad. Over there, in the flesh of the child, they become transformed. They are now one thing. The child is one thing made up of the father and mother. And so too, it's in this avodah that when we are making the union of Hashem with this world, we're not just joining like two opposite things and that's where it stays, but rather through the union, we are creating a totally new thing. That we make for Hashem, a home down here below that's considered like a totally new thing, just like we said before, that we're creating a new child through the union of the Chasunah and Kala. Just like when it comes to forming the child, we say, the Chazal said there are three partners in every person. There's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's Hashem, and there's his father and his mother. This means it's insufficient just to have the Mishpi and the Makabel. It's not just enough to have the father and mother to be able to make the child who is a combination of the father and mother. One needs a third thing. What is the third thing? Hashem. So too it's an also when we make a home for the Eibishter down here below. It's insufficient to have the union of the giver and the receiver. We need to have also an empowerment from Hashem, the third partner that's beyond both of them, just like we need to have Hashem in as a third partner in creating a child. And then the Rebbe says, this is in the macro, in the big picture. Hashem, the world, the power to join Hashem in the world. Now going back in the micro, the person himself, we also have three things. The two things that are joined and the power that's higher than them. What's the three things? The person that's fulfilling the mitzvah itself, there's also similar to these three things. And what are they? First of all, there's the person that's performing the mitzvah. Second thing is, then there's the action. Whatever activity you're doing to do the mitzvah. So it's a certain activity. So there is the performance of the mitzvah. And then the third thing is, and then there's the item with which the mitzvah is performed. One uses a certain object, a certain item with which a mitzvah is performed. So you have, for example, you put up a mezuzah. You put up a mezuzah, there's the person, there's the action of hanging the mezuzah, and then there's the mezuzah itself. Or even in a broader sense, there's the door and there's the house upon which the mezuzah is being placed. So therefore, just like in the big picture, and just like in the creation of a child, there's the father and the mother and the Eibishter, and the same thing in the big picture. There is the godliness, and there is the home, which is the world, and there is Hashem, which empowers us to join godliness with this world. So that's the same thing over here. There's the person that performs the mitzvah. There's the action of the mitzvah, and then there's the object of the mitzvah also. And then similarly, the Rebbe explains that there's another like three aspects of every mitzvah. All mitzvahs involve thought, speech, and deed, like it's explained in Likutei Torah. A mitzvah in action has also the speech component, which is, let's say, making the bracha on the mitzvah. And then there's the thought component, whether it's the intention of doing the mitzvah or learning the halachas of the mitzvah and so on. So you also have another thing where the mitzvahs, you have three components. It's not just the two joining together. So now getting back to our topic about the creation of joy and happiness beforehand. It's also the idea of creating joy and happiness before creating the Chasunah and Kala in our service of Hashem. The Mekivin Chasunah and Kala Koya close Avodas Adam, the Mashpia Makabel, since Chasunah and Kala is referring to the general service of the person. which entails doing aspects of mashpia and makabel. This avodah of mashpia and makabel needs a special empowerment, like we said before. Therefore, he prefaces to it the idea of joy and happiness. Why is that necessary? Because as we said before, Simcha breaks through all the barriers. Through the Simcha, through the joy, a person has the capability to break through all the boundaries and all the barriers between all the things that need to be joined through his avodah. For example, Hashem in the world faces a lot of barriers to join him together. And one has Simcha, so then they break through the barriers and Hashem could join with the world. Until they all become like one flesh. And until through Simcha is drawn down the power of the Yisuf down here below, which is the purpose of mitzvahs. So the Rebbe goes on, that's the content of this bracha. Moving by my that the creation of Shashon V'Simcha has a specific advantage, like it's explained, like it's brought down up there in that mind from the Zohar. The bracha Shvi is the seventh bracha. Shashon V'Simcha is the seventh bracha of the entire set of 7 brachas that we recite under the chuppah. That's why it's called Sheva brachas. People mistakenly think Sheva brachas means because it's 7 days of the celebration. That's something else. That's Shivas Yimei HaMishna. Sheva brachas literally means 7 brachas that we recite. And we recite it under the chuppah, and we recite it by the meal after the chuppah, and we recite it during the 7 days whenever we have a meal with a minyan and so on and so forth. So the 7th of these 7 brachas is the bracha Asher bara Shashon V'Simcha. So since it's the 7th bracha, Kelelas as kol habrachas, it includes in it all the brachas. Like Chazal say, kol hashvin chavivin, all the 7th are favored biyachad. So therefore, since it's favorite, so therefore since it's special and since it's beloved, it's going to have everything possible, meaning all the brachas possible. Also in this bracha is included 10 expressions of joy that he says, Shashon Simcha, Gila, Rino, Ditz, etc. Which is a roimez laharchava de la'asid, an idea of specifically 10 expressions of joy indicates and hints at the broadness and expansion that's going to be in the future when Mashiach comes. Then when Mashiach comes, will be the land of the 10 nations. When Hashem will broaden your boundaries. This is also connected with the 10 utterances with which they created the world, and the 10 statements, which is translated commandments, that there's an advantage in both of them. That's why each one of them has their own number of 10. And each one affects the other because each one has something that the other one doesn't have. Not only does the Aseres HaDibros, the 10 commandments, affect the 10 utterances, as in a simple sense that the Aseres HaDibros are bringing godliness into the world, which was created with the 10 utterances, so it elevates the world and it elevates the utterances with which the world was created. But also, the 10 utterances also impact the Aseres HaDibros. Like it's explained the Maimer from the Zohar. It says 10 and 10, on the scale in the holy weight, the holy shekel. Why I say 10, 10? The simple meaning is that each one had 10. But the Chazal explains, the Zohar explains, that there is the 10 of the 10 utterances, and there's the 10 dibris. And both of them together become the holy shekel. So in other words, we see that each one needs the other. especially according to the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov that was brought down and explained in Shaykh B'Munah, that the 10 utterances are renewed every single moment. So if Hashem renews them every single moment, it's understood how powerful they are and how great this is. So therefore, that indicates that's the number 10, how powerful the number 10 is. That's why the 10 expressions of joy by the Bracha Asher Bara is an all-encompassing love. The Rebbe concludes with a bracha. The will of Hashem, through speaking and being involved in these topics in Torah, this actually should become fulfilled in actuality. Because whatever he does, he tells the Yidden to do. Because of Magid Vad Rav Yankov Chukav Mishpatav Yisrael, not Mishpatim. That he tells over his words to Yaakov, his laws, his statutes to the Yidden. In other words, why is it called his laws and his statutes? Because these are things that he fulfills. So when he tells us in Torah to create Chasunah V'Simcha, so he himself has to be the one of the Chasunah V'Simcha. Be fulfilled where it says that he created Chasunah V'Simcha. But he already created them. What does it mean it should be fulfilled? It should be a totally new creation of joy and happiness in an over-the-top type of way. And to be fulfilled what it says over there, speedily Hashem Elokeinu should be heard in the cities of Yehuda and the outskirts of Yerushalayim, Kol Sasim, Kol Simcha, Kol Chasim, Kol Kal, the sound of joy and the sound of happiness, the sound of a Chasim, the sound of a Kal. Not in the way that we are going out of goals in a rush and escaping and so on, but actually we will be in a calm way that we will be returning to Eretz Yisrael. The Simchas Olam al Rosham, and everlasting joy will be upon their heads. Along with this, with the alacrity and speed that comes through joy, as we know that joy makes a person do things very quickly. They're not lazy. They're not sitting back. And that's why it starts off with the words meheirachu, speedily. Take from miyad mamash, immediately mamash, just take place. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.